Caleb Mercer pulled into his driveway with his headlights cutting two pale lanes through the rain. Water hammered the windshield so hard it sounded like someone throwing handfuls of gravel. The wipers could barely keep up, and the streetlights blurred into long orange smears. He sat for a second with the engine running, watching his porch light tremble in the downpour. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet that only shows up when storms bully everyone indoors. Caleb grabbed his lunch bag, his keys, and his phone, then sprinted through the curtain of rain, shoes slipping on the wet concrete. When he got inside, the air felt wrong. Not cold, not hot, just heavy, like the house had been holding its breath. He shook water from his hair and checked the locks out of habit. Deadbolt set, chain hanging, back door latched, windows down. Everything looked normal. The power flickered while he microwaved a frozen meal. The kitchen lights dimmed, then steadied. Caleb ate at the counter and watched the rain race down the glass. It poured with the steady purpose of something that did not get tired. At 10:37 p.m., there was a knock on his front door. Not a tap, not a rattle. 3 knocks, perfectly spaced, firm enough to be heard over the storm. Caleb froze with his fork halfway up. Nobody visited him. His nearest friend lived 20 minutes away and knew better than to drive in weather like this. Another set of 3 knocks. Caleb walked to the hallway slowly, as if the house might crack under sudden movement. He stopped at the peephole. A shape stood on his porch, mostly hidden by the rain. A man, tall, shoulders hunched, face angled down. His jacket was soaked dark and shiny. He did not move like a neighbor. He stood like someone waiting for a rule to be followed. Caleb did not open the door. He cleared his throat and spoke through the wood. "Can I help you?" The man lifted his head. Caleb could not make out his features clearly through the peephole's distortion, but he saw the outline of a smile. "You need to let me in," the man said. His voice was calm, almost polite, and somehow that made Caleb's skin tighten. "No," Caleb said. "Who are you?" The man leaned closer, and the peephole filled with wet fabric and the glint of an eye. "I am the one you left out there." Caleb's stomach turned. He stepped back from the door. "I do not know you." 3 knocks again, harder now. "Let me in." Caleb moved to the living room window and pulled the blinds aside just enough to see. The porch light washed the man in yellow. Rain slid off the brim of a dark cap. His hands hung loosely at his sides. Caleb could see his face now, pale and smooth, almost blank, like it was waiting to be filled with expression. Caleb grabbed his phone and dialed his friend, Marcus Hale. Marcus answered on the second ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Caleb, what is it?" "There is someone at my door," Caleb whispered. "It is late. He is saying weird stuff." Marcus woke up fast. "Call the police." Caleb looked back toward the door. The knocking had stopped. The porch was empty. Caleb swallowed. He scanned the yard. Nothing but rain, shrubs, and the slick shine of the driveway. "He disappeared," Caleb said. Marcus went quiet for a beat. "Maybe he is messing with you. Still, call." Before Caleb could respond, the house made a new sound, a wet slap against the side wall, followed by a dragging scrape along the siding. Caleb turned his head slowly toward the hallway that led to the bedrooms. The sound came from the side of the house, near the guest room window. Then a knock came again. Not on the front door, on glass. Tap, tap, tap. Caleb walked down the hall with his phone to his ear. Marcus was still talking, but Caleb barely heard him. The guest room window curtain fluttered slightly, as if someone had brushed it. Caleb snapped on the guest room light. The curtain was half open. He had closed it earlier. He always closed it because the street light outside made the room look like a fish tank. Caleb stepped closer and pulled the curtain open with a quick yank. The man stood inches from the window, rain pouring off his shoulders. His eyes were wide and bright, and his mouth stretched into that same calm smile. "Let me in," he mouthed, pressing 2 fingers to the glass. Caleb stumbled back, nearly tripping over a box in the corner. His chest felt squeezed. He pointed the phone at the window like it could protect him. "Marcus, he is at my window." "Get away from it," Marcus snapped. "Now." Caleb backed into the hallway. The tapping followed him, moving along the wall outside, like the man was walking parallel to him. Tap, tap, tap. Caleb rushed to the kitchen and yanked open a drawer, grabbing a heavy chef knife. He hated how familiar it felt in his hand, how quickly his mind accepted that this might be needed. He went back to the living room and checked the front door again. The chain was still set. The deadbolt was still locked. A new sound came from above, a faint creak, then another, like someone shifting weight in the attic. Caleb stared at the ceiling. His attic access was in the hallway closet, and he had not opened it since he moved in. The idea of someone up there made the air taste metallic. Marcus was still on the phone, telling him to stay on the line. Caleb finally did what he should have done earlier and dialed 911 with his other hand. The dispatcher answered quickly. Caleb gave his address, his voice shaking as he described the man, the knocking, the window. While he spoke, the rain outside changed. It intensified, but not like weather. It sounded closer, sharper, as if the rain was falling only on his house. Every drop aimed. The front door handle jiggled once, twice. Caleb held his breath. Then the doorbell rang. The man's voice came through the wood, clearer now, as if he had pressed his mouth to the crack. "You are making this harder." Caleb stepped back, knife raised. He heard the dispatcher asking questions, heard Marcus swearing on the other line, heard his own heartbeat louder than everything. Something thumped in the attic. Dust sifted down from the ceiling vent above the hallway. Caleb backed into the living room and kept his eyes on the ceiling. He hated himself for not owning a gun, hated himself for thinking the deadbolt was enough. The attic access panel inside the closet banged once, hard, like a fist from above. Caleb ran to the closet and shoved the door open. The attic panel was bulging downward slightly, the pull cord trembling. A wet voice whispered from the seam, "Let me in." Caleb slammed the closet door shut and pushed his back against it, like his body could act as a lock. The whisper continued, now spreading, as if the words were seeping into the walls. "Let me in. Let me in." Then, everything went quiet at once. No tapping, no whisper, no attic thumps. Caleb stood frozen, listening. Outside, the rain softened, returning to normal storm sounds. The house lights steadied. The air felt less heavy. He stayed like that until the first police cruiser pulled up, red and blue splashing across his blinds. 2 officers knocked and announced themselves. Caleb opened the front door carefully, chain still on, then unhooked it when he saw their uniforms. Relief hit him so fast his knees nearly gave out. The officers swept the house. They checked every room, every window, every door. One officer climbed into the attic with a flashlight. Another walked the perimeter in the rain, shining a beam along the fence and shrubs. They found nothing. No footprints in the mud by the windows. No pry marks on the frames. No forced entry. The attic insulation was undisturbed. Caleb tried to explain the voice, the face at the window, the knocking that moved. The officers listened, polite but skeptical, the way people get when they are trying not to make you feel crazy. Then the officer in the attic called down, "Sir, you need to see this." Caleb followed them to the hallway closet. The officer pulled something from the attic access and held it out in a gloved hand. A soaked baseball cap? Water dripped from it onto the carpet, darkening it in a small, spreading stain. It looked freshly wet, like it had just been worn in the rain. Inside the cap was a small silver key. The officer held it up. Caleb recognized it immediately because it matched the pattern of his own house key, right down to the tiny nick near the top. But Caleb had his keys in his pocket. The officer asked quietly, "Do you have a spare hidden outside?" Caleb shook his head, throat tight. The officer tested the key on the back door. It slid in smoothly and turned. Caleb's mouth went numb. The lock clicked open like it was happy to comply. They changed the locks that night. An emergency locksmith called in through the storm. The officers stayed until the locksmith finished. They told Caleb they would file a report and increase patrols. But their faces said what their words did not. They did not know what they were dealing with. When the last cruiser left, and the locksmith drove away, Caleb stood alone in his kitchen, listening to the rain. The storm had started to fade, the heavy downpour turning into a steady, ordinary drizzle. He checked every window again. He checked the attic panel and screwed it shut. He sat on the couch with every light on until dawn. By morning, the rain had washed the street clean, leaving the world bright and harmless. Birds hopped on wet grass. A neighbor waved while collecting a newspaper. Caleb called in sick and spent the day installing cameras, replacing screws, reinforcing doors. He did not trust the house anymore, not fully, but he refused to leave it in the same naive condition as before. That evening, when the sun set and clouds gathered again, Caleb stood at his front door with his new deadbolt engaged and his phone in his hand. Rain began to fall softly, tapping the roof with gentle fingers. Caleb listened for knocking that did not belong to weather. None came, and for the first time since the storm, he realized the worst part was not what had tried to get inside. It was the proof that it already had a key. The rain started as a mist and turned mean by the time Aaron Cole crossed the county line. He had left work late again, the warehouse lights buzzing behind him as he pulled onto the empty road. The sky pressed low and gray, and the rain thickened until it blurred the trees into dark smears. Aaron turned the radio up to fill the silence, but the signal crackled and died, leaving only static and the steady drumming on the roof. He noticed the headlights in his rearview mirror 10 minutes later. They stayed back at first, far enough not to be rude, but close enough to be present. On a night like this, that was not unusual. Still, Aaron checked his speed. 55. Normal. He drove on. The road narrowed, trees crowding in, branches clawing at the dark. The rain came harder, bouncing off the pavement in silver flashes. Aaron slowed slightly, and the car behind him slowed too. He turned the radio off. Another mile passed. The headlights were still there. Aaron told himself to relax. Small town roads, late shift, bad weather. Someone else just wanted to get home. He took a breath and focused on the road. Then he turned onto Old Mill Road. The shortcut saved him 8 minutes, but it was poorly lit and rarely used. Aaron hesitated at the turn, then took it anyway. The rain soaked the sign until it was unreadable. The headlights followed him. Aaron's jaw tightened. He checked the mirror again. The car was closer now, too close for comfort, its lights bright and unwavering. He could not see the make or model, only the glare. He sped up. The car sped up. Aaron felt a flicker of irritation turn into unease. He tapped his brakes once, a quick warning. The car did not back off. Rain hammered down, loud enough to drown out the engine. Aaron's hands slicked the steering wheel. The road curved sharply, and he took it slower than he wanted to. The car behind him stayed glued to his bumper, lights washing the inside of his car white. That was when the horn sounded. One long blast, aggressive and impatient. Aaron muttered a curse. He did not respond. He focused on the road, heart beating faster. Old Mill Road passed an abandoned gas station, its sign rusted and leaning. The pumps were dark, but the canopy light flickered weakly. Aaron glanced at it, considering pulling in. Before he could decide, the car behind him swerved slightly, as if testing space. Aaron's breath caught. He accelerated hard, tires hissing on wet asphalt. The road stretched ahead, empty and slick. The car stayed with him, engine roaring louder now, horn blasting again. Fear settled in his chest, heavy and cold. Aaron grabbed his phone with one hand and tried to dial 911. The screen lit up, then went dark. No signal. He laughed once, sharp and humorless. The road curved again, tighter this time. Aaron slowed instinctively, and the car behind him surged forward, nearly clipping his bumper. Aaron yelped and corrected, heart slamming. He turned suddenly onto a side road, gravel spraying. The move was desperate, impulsive. The headlights followed without hesitation. Aaron's mouth went dry. The side road was worse, barely maintained, puddles swallowing his tires. Trees arched overhead, blocking what little light the sky offered. He could not outrun the car. He knew it now. Ahead, a shape loomed through the rain. A small pull-off near a creek, marked by a wooden sign half rotted by weather. Aaron recognized it dimly, a fishing spot locals used during the day. An idea sparked. He slowed abruptly and swung into the pull-off, cutting his lights at the last second. The world plunged into darkness except for rain and the distant glow of the other car's headlights as it roared past the entrance. Aaron held his breath. Gripping the wheel so hard, his fingers ached. The headlights vanished down the road. For a moment, there was only rain and the sound of his own breathing. Aaron exhaled shakily and wiped his face. He waited, counting slowly, expecting the headlights to reappear. They did not. He started to relax, shoulders dropping. He reached to turn his headlights back on. A knock sounded on his driver's side window. Aaron screamed. He twisted toward the sound, heart trying to tear free. A man stood inches from the glass, rain sliding off his hooded jacket. His face was pale, eyes wide and unblinking, mouth slack like it had forgotten how to close. The man leaned closer and cupped his hands around his eyes to peer inside. Aaron fumbled for the door lock, panic making him clumsy. The lock clicked down just as the man's hand smacked the glass hard enough to rattle it. "Open the door," the man shouted, his voice hoarse and urgent. "You almost hit me back there." Aaron shook his head violently, breath coming in gasps. The man's expression shifted, urgency melting into something flat and annoyed. "You are being rude," he said. He moved away from the window, disappearing into the rain. Aaron watched frantically, expecting him to run back to the road. Instead, the headlights came on behind Aaron's car. The same car the man had circled around. The engine revved. The car lurched forward, slamming into Aaron's rear bumper. Aaron cried out as his body snapped forward. The seatbelt bit into his chest. He jammed the key, engine roaring to life. The car rammed him again, harder. Aaron slammed the gas. His tires spun in the mud, spraying water and gravel. The car behind him pushed, metal screaming against metal. Aaron's car broke free suddenly, shooting forward toward the creek. He yanked the wheel, barely missing the water, and tore back onto the road. Rain blurred his vision. He drove blind, sobbing, praying for lights, for houses, for anything. The headlights stayed with him. Aaron rounded a bend and saw salvation ahead, flashing red and blue reflected in the rain. A sheriff cruiser sat at the edge of the road, hazard lights on, blocking half the lane. Aaron laid on the horn and swerved toward it. The cruiser's lights snapped fully on. The car behind Aaron slammed its brakes and skidded sideways, missing the cruiser by inches. It fishtailed, then shot past, disappearing into the trees. Aaron skidded to a stop beside the cruiser, hands shaking uncontrollably. He threw his door open and fell out, rain soaking him instantly. The deputy ran to him, asking questions Aaron could barely answer. He pointed down the road, words tumbling over each other. Another cruiser arrived minutes later. They searched the road and surrounding woods, but the rain washed everything clean. Tire tracks vanished into mud. No car, no driver. They took Aaron's statement in the cruiser. Heater blasting, rain pounding the roof. The deputy frowned at the damage to Aaron's bumper. Fresh and undeniable. "You did the right thing," the deputy said. "That stretch has a bad history." Aaron looked up. "What kind of history?" The deputy hesitated. A few years back, there were reports of a man who followed drivers in storms. He would force them to stop. Sometimes he claimed accidents. Sometimes he asked for help. A couple people went missing. Then it stopped. They never caught him. Aaron stared at the rain streaking down the window, imagining that pale face inches from his own. The deputies escorted Aaron home. He did not take Old Mill Road again. Weeks passed. The damage to his car was repaired. Life settled back into routine. Rainstorms still came and went. But every time Aaron drove at night and saw headlights behind him, he felt his chest tighten. And when rain fell hard enough to erase the world beyond his windshield, Aaron made sure one thing stayed true. No matter how lonely the road felt, he never took the shortcut again. The rain had already soaked through Mark Benson's jacket by the time his car died. The engine sputtered once, coughed like it was clearing its throat, and then went silent in the middle of a two-lane road swallowed by woods. Mark coasted to the shoulder, tires crunching over wet gravel, and sat there listening to the rain batter the roof like it was trying to get in. He tried the ignition again. Nothing. Mark sighed and checked his phone. One bar of service, flickering like it might give up if challenged. He was 20 miles from home, coming back from visiting his sister, and the storm had rolled in faster than predicted. He stepped out into the rain, popped the hood, and stared at the engine like it might explain itself. Water ran down his neck. Lightning flashed in the distance, briefly turning the trees into sharp black cutouts. Behind him, a shape appeared through the rain. A house. Mark frowned. He had driven this road dozens of times and never noticed a house there. It sat set back from the road, barely visible through the trees, a two-story place with a steep roof and dark windows. One light glowed faintly on the porch. Mark weighed his options: sit in a dead car during a storm with no signal, or knock on a stranger's door. Thunder answered for him, cracking so loud it vibrated in his chest. Mark closed the hood and jogged toward the house, shoes sinking into mud. As he got closer, he noticed how quiet it felt beneath the trees. The rain still fell, but the sound dulled like the house absorbed it. He climbed the porch steps and knocked. The door opened almost immediately. A man stood there, thin and tall, wearing a gray sweater and slacks, both dry. His hair was neatly combed, his face long and pale. He smiled, slow and deliberate. "Come in," the man said. "You are getting soaked." Mark hesitated, then nodded. "Thanks. My car broke down." The man stepped aside. Warm air spilled out, carrying the smell of old wood and something metallic. Mark stepped inside, wiping his shoes on the mat. The door closed behind him with a solid thump. The living room was dimly lit by a single lamp. Old furniture sat neatly arranged, untouched by time. Framed photos lined the walls, all of them showing the same house in different seasons. Snow, Sunday, rain. Mark shrugged out of his jacket. "Appreciate this. I just need to call for a tow." "Of course," the man said. "Phone service is unreliable out here, but you can use the house line." He gestured toward a small table with a rotary phone. Mark picked up the receiver. No dial tone. "That is strange," the man said mildly. "Storms do that." Mark glanced toward the door. Rain streaked the glass, heavy and relentless. Lightning flashed again, but the windows did not brighten. "How long has this storm been going?" Mark asked. The man tilted his head. "A while." Mark tried his phone again. No service now. He swallowed. "What is your name?" Mark asked. The man smiled wider. "People call me Thomas." Mark nodded. "I am Mark. Thanks again for this." Thomas folded his hands. "You should sit. Storms like this tend to last." Mark sat on the edge of the couch, tension coiling in his shoulders. He noticed there was no television, no clutter, no signs of anyone actually living there beyond the furniture and the man standing in front of him. Thunder boomed overhead, closer now. The house did not shake. Mark stood abruptly. "I think I will wait in my car, in case the tow truck gets signal nearby." Thomas's smile faltered for just a second. "I would not recommend that," he said. "The rain gets worse." Another crack of thunder, directly overhead. Mark flinched. The lights flickered, then steadied. Mark glanced at the photos on the wall. One caught his eye, a picture of the house during a storm, rain slanting across the image. On the porch stood a man, not Thomas. The man looked panicked, hand raised mid-knock. Mark stood slowly. "Thomas?" he said carefully. "Who is that?" Thomas followed his gaze. His expression softened. "Visitors." Mark's pulse spiked. Visitors who stayed. The rain outside intensified, pounding the roof harder than before. Mark moved toward the door. "I need to leave." Thomas stepped into his path, blocking it with his thin frame. "The storm brought you here," he said. "It always does." Mark backed up, heart racing. He scanned the room for something, anything. His eyes landed on another photo. Different man, same porch, Same rain, none of them smiling. What happens to them? Mark demanded. Thomas's voice dropped, losing its warmth. They waited out the storm. Mark lunged for the door. Thomas grabbed his arm, fingers cold and surprisingly strong. Mark twisted free and slammed his shoulder into the door, wrenching it open. Rain exploded inside. Mark bolted down the porch steps and sprinted toward the road. Mud grabbed at his shoes. Behind him, Thomas stood in the doorway, rain stopping inches from the threshold like an invisible wall. "Come back," Thomas called calmly. "You will not make it far." Mark reached his car and yanked the door open. Water flooded the interior. He threw himself inside and slammed it shut. The engine turned over. Once, twice. It roared to life. Mark sobbed in relief and slammed the car into drive. As he pulled back onto the road, he glanced in the mirror. The house was gone. Only trees and rain stood where it had been. Mark did not slow down until he reached the first lit gas station miles away. He sat there, shaking, while the storm weakened, then faded entirely. The tow truck arrived later. The driver frowned at the engine. "Nothing wrong with it now," he said. "You sure it died?" Mark nodded, unable to speak. Days later, curiosity drove him back to the road in daylight. He found the spot easily. There was no driveway, no foundation, just trees and wet leaves. A local at the gas station told him the story when Mark asked. "Old house burned down decades ago during a storm," the man said. "Family died inside. Folks say it still shows up when the rain is bad. Anyone who goes in never comes back." Mark went home and threw away the jacket he wore that night. Even now, when rain pounds hard against his windows, Mark listens closely, because sometimes, beneath the sound of the storm, he swears he hears knocking.